Diving save. Liza Carlin for three.
It's going to be Bloomquist. What a save! 15, 10, 5. Lago looking to go all the way. She scores!
Desjardins with the block.
Kashuk's got him down. That's how you do it. There's a fire, and he just picked his spot. Centering pass. Scores! The winter season has concluded for Pony Sports. Welcome to Ponies All Access, our winter recap edition here on VAC TV, and an ultra successful winter season it was here for Stillwater Pony Sports on campus. As we welcome in our co-host here of Ponies All Access, Mike Peden joins us now. Mike, this was a winter season, a lot of uncertainty kind of in some teams we didn't know because of the conference-only schedule that they're playing, among other factors, a little bit of uncertainty. But as you can see, 7 section champions this winter. I think they did all right.
They did all right, and I think it's worth noting a combination of luck and diligence that we didn't hear of any cancellations or postponements, or at least nothing to the magnitude of what happened with some other schools. Girls basketball comes to mind. Stillwater had to play a team that lost the last third of their season due to COVID protocols. So the fact that Stillwater was able to get through their seasons without too many bumps, I'd say, is remarkable. And hopefully around this time next year, you and I can go back to the studio and we won't have to worry about COVID protocols and what happens if there's a test case. But all in all, it was a successful winter campaign, and for a lot of athletes, they were aware of the risks. A couple of them told me I did the smart thing by staying home, but they all wanted to get out there and prove why they belong, why they got these scholarship offers, etc. And it gave us a lot to celebrate. You and I joked about all of the miles we would have racked up in a normal season with girls hockey going to state, wrestling going back to state, girls basketball going back to state. Hopefully next year we'll be able to relive all of that, and you can get the proper XL Energy Center introduction.
We're going to have an empty fridge at the XL and the U.S. Bank Stadium here possibly next year. So let's start things off here first with girls hockey, Mike, as we'll kind of go back and forth here for this Ponies edition. It had been 11 years since they've gone to state, but finally, for the first time in over a decade, they punched their ticket to the state tournament, as these last 2 years have been great. Mira Yeloswo has done a phenomenal job as head coach, but making it to state and kind of breaking through that barrier is such a big part for that program.
It absolutely is. You and I have talked about girls hockey over the years and how they've been building up for this moment. It bodes well for future seasons, but you look at the playmakers on the Stillwater girls hockey team. Lexi Huber, 27 goals, and she will add a few more as a soccer player for St. Thomas next season. Josie St. Martin, 26 assists, 20 goals, so she was another facilitator on the offensive side for the Ponies. Sophie Kronk doing a terrific job, averaging just over 1 goal, 1 1/3 if you want to be precise, 10 wins. So all around offense, defense, that quarterfinal game, just a 1-goal game. You know how hockey is. One crazy bounce, one lucky break can make all the difference, but all things considered, it was a big season for Stillwater girls hockey, and to get to state, they had to knock off one of those perennial thorns in Hill Murray. You were there for that big moment, and while they didn't get the traditional experience, limited fans and things of that nature, they will have a lot of confidence going into next season.
Yeah, and that they'll kind of piggybacking off a couple of those points. You're right. Sophie Kronk was great in net. She's just kind of been a steady goaltender throughout these last couple of years, but got to give big props to freshman number 31, Lily Timmons. Really came in and was great, especially in that Hill Murray game. She pitched a shutout in that 1-0 game. We all knew, it seemed like as this season was progressing for the girls hockey squad although we didn't want to, you want to be as impartial as possible, of course, on the air. You don't want to look ahead too much. It was a crash course. Stillwater and Hill Murray were floating around the top 5 all season long, statewide, and we all knew kind of in Section 4 that might happen. Stillwater suffered a late season loss to Eastridge, who was in the top 4 seeds in that section tournament. So a lot of people thought, oh, maybe Eastridge, maybe someone like Roseville could play spoiler in that section. But when it came down to it, we saw Stillwater Hill Murray in an absolute classic that went down. Of course, the shutout for Lily Timmons. Brooke Nelson had the game-winning goal, being the only goal on the board for that team. But this team, such a bright future. Talking to Coach Mira this season, she's like, this is a good team. There's no doubt about it that this is a good team, but the future is extremely bright. And it seems like every time Don and I got on the mic for those games, the progression you saw from Josie St. Martin, who is now just a freshman. You mentioned her stats before. Just amazing potential she has, with Josie and a lot of her other comrades coming back next season. I mean, this is a team that they're going to be here for a long time. There's no doubt about it. With Josie still in the fold and a lot of other, I mentioned, right, Lily Timmons was great in net this season, and she's just a freshman as well. The next 3 years, who knows what they can do. So this is just their first taste. I know they wanted to get a little bit more out of their first taste. Of course, a 1-0 loss to Eastview in the state quarterfinals there. Eastview put together a great defensive game plan, kept Stillwater out of the middle, and really did a phenomenal job. But Stillwater will be back. This Pony girls hockey team has one of the brightest future on campus at Stillwater Area High School. There's no question about that.
So girls hockey, they have a bright future with those 2 freshmen that Ted noted. We can't wait to see what the future holds. Boys hockey, bit of a different story. They had a solid start, and then things kind of went up and down all season. They lost to Hill Murray in the section semifinals, which is becoming a story that is seemingly on repeat. But they had some bright spots in this COVID-shortened season. Ty Tucito leading the team with 24 points, 11 goals, 13 assists. Ted, you were on hand to follow boys hockey. Every year, it seems like they run into Hill Murray at the sections, and they've had some good teams in those games. They were in it against Hill Murray. They just couldn't quite get over the hump. What would you make of boys hockey, and what do you think are their prospects moving ahead?
It's tough when you're in Section 4 AA right now. Moundsview, I want to give credit to Moundsview. They took a big step up this year as well. That Mustangs program actually was the number 3 seed, whereas Stillwater ended up being the number 4 seed. For the longest time, Stillwater, White Bear Lake, and Hill Murray had the stronghold on those top 3 seeds in the sections. But for the boys hockey team this season, they came out guns a-blazing. I mean, they got a lot of new names and new places. There was a lot of uncertainty. You saw it at other schools where kids that were juniors, seniors, were a lot of them say, well, we don't know if we're going to have a season when it came down to December. So they bolted to juniors. And then a decent amount of them came back. Stillwater wasn't so lucky, as Noah Tussey and Michael Sweetland, 2 of the big-time forwards from last year's team, did not come back to the Stillwater High School team this year. If they would have come back, it could have been a different story down the stretch for this Ponies team. But, as you said, Ty Tucito stepped up in a big way as kind of the leading scorer. Riley Scusa, another guy that kind of stepped up in this. And on the back end, Evan Murr was there all season long. He's been there ever since he was a sophomore, playing some really good hockey as well. But this was a team that started off strong. Victories over White Bear Lake. Cretin-Durham Hall was a ranked team at the time, and they played really well. Those were, I think, might have been in the same week as well, or very close to each other on the schedule. Those were 2 big wins at the time, and this team was riding high. But the weird thing with Stillwater boys hockey's schedule is because of the way things shook out at the St. Croix Valley Rec Center, right? They've got youth hockey there. They've got Matamidi boys, Matamidi girls, and all that stuff. They were front-loaded in the schedule with a lot of home games. And on the back half of the schedule, a lot of road games for Greg Zannon's crew. So they down the stretch, a lot of games on the road, kind of struggled a little bit. But, we've seen teams like this that struggle down the stretch, but when it's playoff time, it's time to reset your mentality and things change. And that's what happened with Stillwater. They came out and they played extremely well defensively in that quarterfinal against Eastridge, and then they played the semifinals against Hill Murray the same day as the girls section final, and they played them. They played well. Hill Murray, they were trading goals there for a while. Hill took the lead, but then Stillwater 2-1. Stillwater came back to tie it 2-2, and they were in that game all the way to the bitter end. A big difference from when Hill Murray played White Bear Lake in the section final, which was all Hill Murray all the way through there at Aldrich Arena. So this was it was an up and down team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Once again, the future looks bright. An undefeated JV squad for the boys hockey team might provide some source for optimism for the fans of the St. Croix Colts here. So this is a interesting team. I like what I saw. You know, it's kind of been the narrative for Stillwater boys hockey. They've got some good forwards, need to improve a little bit maybe in the goaltending, and then you'll be all set. But this is a team. That's the beauty about Section 4 AA. Rarely, and maybe this year was the rare exception, actually, to the rule, is that rarely do you have a team in Section 4 that is so much better than everybody else. Usually Stillwater, White Bear Lake, and Hill Murray are usually pretty close together, and those semifinal games and eventually those section final games are instant classics. And that could be the case here coming up this next season. We'll see if Stillwater, right, Scusa, Tocito come back there in the forwards. They're going to have to replace some defensemen. Murr and Manning will graduate. So they're going to have to make some changes. But with an undefeated JV squad coming in, Mike, you know you've been covering high school athletics for a long time. JV success doesn't always guarantee varsity success. You got to find a way to take that success and try to get it to the next level. That's going to be the biggest challenge here for this boys hockey team. A lot of hype this season, and maybe the most hype was on the following team we're going to talk about here, girls basketball, that have been one of the most successful teams in the winter season on campus for Stillwater area high school. And Mike, this was a season where, you know, it seems like every year Stillwater has had one big player graduate. Sarah Scalia 2 years ago, Liza Carlin, and now you come into this year, Alexis Pratt steps into maybe that captain's role, right? You know, she, as we said those last two, she played with Scalia, she played with Carlin. Now she steps into the role as maybe the leading go-to scorer, so to speak, for this team. So Alexis Pratt steps in, and of course you've got younger sister Lexi Carlin kind of steps in there to the starting five. Lizzie Holder played a big part down low in this one. They fell in the quarterfinals to a Chaska team, and we mentioned the conference-only schedules. It seems like girls basketball was one where it was you had 5 or 6 undefeated teams there this whole season. Your Hopkins, your Chaskas, your Stillwaters. I think there were a few others in the Farmington might have been in there as well. So it was very hard to judge, and you know that kind of reared its ugly head, at least for the Pony fans, in that state quarterfinal against Chaska.
Well, in that state quarterfinal, Stillwater was up by 7, but they had trouble forcing turnovers, and ever since Willie Taylor got there, this was a staple of his at St. Paul Central. They like to score off turnovers, push the pace, get those points off turnovers, fast breaks, all of that, and wear you out that way. That just didn't happen, but Chaska, one of 2 nationally ranked teams, according to the ESPN high school rankings, Hopkins being the other. Chaska, they have a big 3 of Mallory Heyer, Kennedy Sanders, and Kaylee Van Epps, and Kennedy went off 31 points, a season high for her. And when your opponent is clicking like that, it's tough to contain. We should also point out there were some teams that had players leave early. They had enough credits to graduate from their high schools and start their college careers. Stillwater didn't have that. So much like hockey, you had that element in girls basketball, with all of the eligibility requirements going out the window in this pandemic era. Alexis Pratt had a solid season, nearly 20 points per game. Another sister we should point out is Amber Scalia, Sarah's little sister. She put up 16.1. Lizzie Holder, moving to a varsity role primarily, did quite well. You mentioned Lexi Carlin. And this seems to be the pattern for Stillwater girls basketball, where there's 1 or 2 big names that graduate. Alexis Pratt and Gianna Carr, also a Division I commit. She'll play for Tennessee State. They'll be moving on, but when you look at the pieces coming back next year, we'll have to see what happens in the Suburban East Conference. Eastridge is putting things together. Stillwater ran the tables until that section final, and without the opportunity to play teams outside the conference, it's hard to say, because if Stillwater, if they were hitting their threes, I know Alexis Pratt struck up on the floor. If she's able to find her shot, then maybe Stillwater is able to hang in there with Chaska. And as you said, so many undefeated teams, which made it tough to gauge who are the teams to look for. But overall, we shouldn't forget this. Stillwater, in the last 3 years, just one loss in conference play. They swept the regular season, swept the section. That's pretty impressive to go 54, something like that. 53 wins out of your last 54 conference games. That's a pretty impressive mark. And when you look at some of the new faces, Amy Thompson comes to mind too. I know you covered some of their games this season through Back and Prep Spotlight, and you had nothing but praise for the freshman who transferred from Matamidi. So Stillwater, they're going to look a lot different without the speedy Alexis Pratt running a point next year. But I think they will be in good hands.
That's the thing about Stillwater, right? We see it a lot at the college level right now. The transfer portal. It seems like Stillwater has maximized in the high school transfer portal, right? Gianna Carr, transfer from Hill Murray. Amy Thompson, although she was a ninth grader from the Matamidi system. I mean, what are the Carlin, Pratt? They were all transfers. What do you say about Willie Taylor's ability to go into the portal, so to speak, and bring these girls to Stillwater High School?
It's amusing you say that, because every time Hopkins wins a title, or if another team dominates, usually Hopkins is the scapegoat. Or way back when, Willie Taylor was the head coach for those St. Paul Central super teams, as I like to call it. One of them went 32-0, and they became the scapegoat, if you will, that led to changes in transfer procedures. But I think it just speaks to his acumen. He has a lot of success. A lot of people remember what he did at St. Paul Central. And then when he took the Stillwater job, it's been a procedural growth, but a growth nonetheless. We also know how attractive winning is. Everyone wants to win a state title, of course, and not everyone can. But when you see programs that are able to do well, Willie Taylor taking Stillwater girls basketball to places they hadn't been in a long time. They've made state the last 3 years. Before then, they only had reached state twice, in 1984 and 1988. And now they're the favorites in their section almost every year. They've become the powerhouse. And one of the Stillwater parents noted how surreal it is that over time, they become the dominant power in the Suburban East Conference, and now they're beating up on everybody else when Stillwater used to be a sub 500 team. But Willie has a strong track record. He's been able to do it with several different assistants working with them, and you see the potential they have. Success breeds success. That's why a lot of kids enroll in the Hopkins program, and I think you're starting to see that play out with the Stillwater program. You see what they're doing. You and I probably don't help with all the TV coverage we give them in normal times. But when you are looking for opportunities to play, opportunities to get your name out there, that will resonate with some of these kids. Think about where Alexis Pratt came from, North St. Paul, a program that has struggled historically. Gianna Carr, there was a personal situation, but it worked out well for her. Liza Carlin, same thing at St. Paul Central. That program wasn't doing all that well, and she wanted to play in a competitive conference for a competitive team. And look what happened. She turned into an Athena Award winner, even though she only was at the school for 2 years. Amy Thompson, the next person. So when you speak of transfer portals, as hard as it's going to be to not see Alexis Pratt zoom her way through the floor and outrun everybody, I'm excited. There will probably be another name you and I haven't heard of yet that will enter the transfer portal and become a part of the Ponies. So, Ted, I think next year, if we have a normal season, you and I would say the odds are good that we'll have to make at least one trip to Williams Arena.
Exactly. It is going to be, and it seems like, I mean, we've now gotten to a point, Mike, you and I, since we really ramped up the sports coverage, we've reached the graduation cycle, right? We've reached now the 4-year point where we can kind of go back and, man, I remember covering Alexis Pratt. I think she came in as an 8th grader, as a transfer, 8th or 9th grade, I can't remember, as coming into the Stillwater program, and you could just see the development from then to now, and kind of seeing players go through that. But you mentioned Amy Thompson. I was on the call for a few of those games and talking to Willie Taylor. He's like, she's got the potential to be the best player in Minnesota when all is said and done, in terms of her senior year. And she can already shoot the ball really good from the outside. She's a smart player for a freshman. You look at Amy Thompson, Lexi Carlin, Amber Scalia will come back next year. I mean, although you're going to have some seniors, no doubt about it. You mentioned Pratt, Carr, a couple of Division I players. This is a team that they say it a lot of times with big-time college programs. They don't rebuild, they reload, and it seems like that's exactly what's going to happen here.
Of course, Stillwater doesn't have just one basketball team. The boys also got to play in this COVID-shortened season. They went 4-15, started the season off with a win over Park of Cottage Grove, and then struggled down the stretch. They did their best to hang with Woodbury in the section quarterfinal round, and Woodbury almost getting a big win over Cretin-Durham Hall in the finals. Obviously, the Raiders won that one, but even with only a 4-win season, Ted, some bright spots for the Ponies include Max Shukenzki, 24.2 points per game. I'm sure he and everyone else would like to have a few more wins on the resume, but I have a feeling even if you don't get the wins, there is a greater sense of appreciation for all the athletes that got a chance to play and finish out their seasons, knowing what happened last year and how quickly it can all be taken away. We'll see if they can build on that win total next year, but I'd say this is better than nothing.
Yeah, this was a team. You might look at the record and say, well, what happened to these guys, right? I mean, I thought they were going in the right direction. You look at those games and you really look at the scores down the stretch, they were close games. There was a lot of close games that went down to it. And you mentioned Sam Shukenzki, young player, and he's going to be a good player. There's no doubt about it. When his Stillwater career is over, he's going to, I think he might contend to possibly be the all-time leading scorer, considering he got a good start at that last season when all is said and done. But a lot of close games. A lot of close games, and we'll see, some days, it's a lot of times when you have an offensive team that likes to shoot the outside shot, it's when you're on, and you've known this covering Stillwater girls basketball. Sometimes when you're on, and when you're off, you can't hit anything, and sometimes that can work against you. But a lot of these games, I would say, you go down the list and you go down the schedule, 80 to 90% of those games were within 5 to 6 points in the final couple of possessions. They were right there. They were right there to be able to take these games late. They played with a lot of teams, but when you have a young team and you're led by a lot of youth, sometimes that's growing pains. They don't finish down the stretch. Talking to head coach Brady Hannigan throughout the season, he's like, man, we just need to be able to finish. If we can finish games, maybe we won't learn it this year, but eventually if this core group learns to finish down the stretch, we could do something here in a few years. So that boys basketball team has some potential. Of course, it's led by Max Shukenzki. He's going to be the guy that kind of carries this team. But it'll be interesting. And we know the last couple of years, the Suburban East. Now, you mentioned how Stillwater has dominated the Suburban East. It's been, last year, I think, it was very competitive in the Suburban East, right? You've got Eastridge up there, Cretin-Durham Hall. I think last year, White Bear Lake had a decent team as well that were in 15, 16 wins there towards the ends of the season. And Section 4 is as good as it gets in high school boys basketball in terms of the big schools, in terms of Sections 1 through 8. So even if you get to that point, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy with schools like Cretin-Durham Hall, Eastridge. You mentioned Woodbury in the section final. They've been really improving as of late on the boys' side. So they've got their work cut out for them, no question about that, especially with the tough competition.
Another winter sports team that generates a lot of headlines these days is boys swimming and diving. Ted has become the big celebrity in town when it comes to swimming coverage this season, and a lot of athletes made a splash, no pun intended, Will Whittington among them. Part of an athletic lineage with Maddie now at Illinois playing volleyball. But Ted, what are your thoughts for boys swimming and diving this season?
Well, this was a team that this springtime comes around and this is what happens. They host the section meet and they win the section meet. That's just what happens, boys and girls side. But this was something about this year was a little bit different. Every swim meet we went to, records were broken. Every week, and even the ones that we didn't go to, records were broken. Will Whittington and others really continued to break their records as this went on. And Whittington, state champion in the 50-yard freestyle as well as the 100-yard freestyle at the state meet, with the Ponies capturing a 6th place finish at the Minnesota State High School League state meet. Will Whittington will trade in one SEC for another as he's going to be swimming at the University of Missouri. He was great. There were many other great swimmers on this team. I look at Brody Watson, who's a senior. I look at Aiden Bloomquist. That relay was really good this year. So this is a team, Brian Luke does it year after year, and this is just another example of what this program continues to do.
And the state tournament participants just keep on coming among the winter sports teams at Stillwater Area High School. Ted, another situation where you and I would have racked up a lot of miles in a normal season. That being said, still a lot of accomplishments worth celebrating. What else do you have for us?
Well, this is kind of finishing off with the sports. As we said at the top of the show, 7 section champs on campus for Stillwater Area High School. We start first with wrestling and gymnastics. We'll kind of start there. Wrestling has really been put on the map as one of the top programs as of late on campus, especially in the winter season. You see 2 individual state champions here with Hunter Leiden at 170, Roman Rogotsky at 195. 2 individual state champs. They fell in a very exhilarating, exciting semifinal in the team semifinals to St. Michael Albertville. Gymnastics makes it to state yet again. The last about 3 or 4 years, they've won some section titles. This year, placing 5th at the state meet over there. A great career now for senior Nora Bates as she kind of moves on to her next direction. Also, big congratulations to Alpine boys and girls skiing as they both made it here to state this season. And Mike, that'll wrap up our winter edition. And as we said, 7 section champions, although maybe the state titles haven't quite followed like you remember that year a couple of years ago where we had 5 of them in that year. But this has been, considering all the challenges, you mentioned how Stillwater has done a good job. You know, we go back to the fall season. They didn't really have any postponements there as well. We go to the winter. You got to give credit where credit is due. Stillwater has done a good job keeping their students healthy, keeping their students kind of away from these postponements and cancellations.
Absolutely, and credit also belongs to the athletes and coaches themselves for doing what they could to follow all the protocols. We know of some other teams that weren't able to do such a good job in that department, and they lost games. And in the case of some teams, they had to bow out of section or state tournament play. Now, this isn't to blame anyone or say it's their fault. It's just how it is until we can mitigate the virus. But last winter, girls basketball didn't get the chance to play in the bronze medal game because that's when the pandemic was just materializing. There are no consolation brackets this year, but in January, when they decided we're going to have a go with winter sports and see what happens, a lot of questions, a lot of thoughts about whether or not it was a good idea. You know, we'll find out down the road. I'm sure we'll look back on this in hindsight more than once, but this was an impressive year. And I will say this, Ted, I did miss the experience of spending an entire day at the Axe because Stillwater Wrestling, normally, we should point this out, the team tournament is all held at one site. Because of scheduling and other conflicts, they had to host the quarterfinals in alternate sites. So I think Stillwater had to play in Hastings for their quarterfinal round, then made it to the semis against St. Michael Albertville. Ironically, at St. Michael Albertville, if I'm correct. So
yeah, it is, yeah.
I guess, much like Tampa Bay.
Exactly. They ended up doing pretty well in that team tournament as well.
They got to hook. Yeah, so my point was I did miss, though, what would have been spending an entire day at the Axe and enjoying all of the concession food because the quarters and semis are back-to-back, and then you get a little bit of a break before you get to that bronze medal and championship round. But hats off to Stillwater Wrestling. They keep finding a way to stay competitive. And like you said, maybe the championships haven't come with these section titles, but it's really hard to win a state tournament no matter the sport. It can seem frustrating when you're always on the cusp, but we don't have the same setup that college or the pros do. And especially this season, you had a lot of matchups that you couldn't prep for with no non-conference games on the schedule. But it was a fun winter season. I know I'm looking forward to getting back out there. You and I are both on the path to vaccination, so the next time we do this show, hopefully we can do it in the studio. But as I reflect on all of these successes and accomplishments for winter sports, I hope that's what athletes remember. I'm sure it was tough to play in front of limited or no fans in some cases, and you have to go through testing. You have to do all of these things that nobody had planned for. You don't prepare for a pandemic in the midst of a season. But, Alexis Pratt got to add a few more points to her Gaudy total. And for some of these up-and-comers, Amy Thompson comes to mind. Having this season will get her on the path to 1,000, maybe 2,000 points. Same thing for athletes like Amber Scalia and Lexi Carlin, who played mostly stat padding time a year ago. She moved into the starting lineup and held her own for girls basketball. Wrestling, I know Reed Valentine won't be there, but how many athletes will take inspiration from what he and others have accomplished these last 3 years, making it to state and getting 2 second-place finishes and reaching the semis for this year's tournament? Girls hockey has a lot to be excited about. Swimming and diving, gymnastics, after they missed the state tournament for a year, they found a way to get back into it. They placed 5th this year. Who knows? Maybe they'll get back on the medal stand next year. The future is bright, and with the hope that things will be a little more normal next winter, I don't know about you, Ted, what the first thing you're going to do, but I've got a feeling concessions or full-day experiences at the Axe or Williams will be looked upon with far more enthusiasm than in the past.
Exactly. It's got a lot of great things, as you said, a lot of bright spots coming up. And with spring sports coming up, I was just talking to Mike about this before. We have no idea. Absolutely nobody has no idea what's going to happen. We haven't seen these sports in 2 years, baseball, softball, lacrosse, all of those spring sports. So make sure you stay tuned. We'll have some lacrosse coverage as well, highlight coverage of baseball and softball here on VAC TV. So for my co-host Mike Pete and I'm Ted LaRue, our director Corey Spahn, it has been a great winter season, and we celebrated here with our winter recap here on Ponies All Access. All right, Mike, we are going to see you soon. Let the countdown clock begin. Mike, tell the folks when your first game back on VAC TV is.
April 28th. Weather permitting and pandemic permitting. So obviously you and I are just 2 pieces in this really complicated puzzle, but April 28th, because I'm scheduled for my second dose.
I got it circled right here.
And when you factor in the window, April 28th, and hopefully that means you'll see a return to me on the live streams. And I know some of you viewers out there enjoy the tape delayed coverage we've been able to provide. We'll certainly look into that because, as you said, we have no idea what will happen with spring sports since no one got to have a season. That's going to make things a lot more unpredictable and a lot more fun. But you and I were talking about the lacrosse schedule, and there are some exciting games, so I would love to be on hand for some of those. A lot of big name teams on the schedule. And don't forget Alexis Pratt, a strong track athlete, so she might have a chance to add another piece of state tournament hardware before she goes to Omaha. Baseball and softball, strong programs, a lot of history in recent years. So if everything goes well, Ted, maybe you and I will find our way to covering some section and state games like we used to do.
I missed Mankato last spring. I got to make my trip back to Mankato for the softball tournament. For all of our entire crew here, we will see you in the spring. Many bright things ahead here at VAC TV and on campus at Stillwater Area High School. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.
For 3, you betcha. You were looking for 5, and she's got diving it. Save. Liza Carlin for 3.
And it's going to be Bloomquist. What a save! 15, 10, 5.
Chicago looking to go all the way. She scores!
Dejarnik with the block.
Kashuk's got him down. That's how you do it. There's a fire, and he just picked his spot. Center